According to reports this morning, the Prime Minister is preparing to tell the country to stay socially distanced until the autumn. I know, your heart is sinking, isn't it? These are the reports coming out today, and the idea is that restrictions could remain in place until the end of the year.
Let's get more on this from Home Office Minister Victoria Atkins. She joins us now. Good morning to you, Victoria Atkins. Thank you for joining us this morning. As Kate will say, you know, there'll be people sitting at home this morning watching that, hearing that the Prime Minister could well turn around and say, you know what, restrictions are going to have to stay until the autumn. It's a very different message to what we have been getting over the last few weeks, certainly. What can you tell us about that and what that looks like?
Yes, well, good morning, everyone. And I'm so sorry that people are finding lockdown tough. I totally understand that. We've got a really clear sort of timeline of how we're going to make decisions on this. So on Monday, we hope to have vaccinated our top 4 most vulnerable groups, our priority groups for vaccination. That will be a huge step forward in really strengthening our defences against this disease. And then next week is a really important week because we will be looking at all the evidence that has been gathered, not just in the UK, but across the world, as to the effect that vaccines have on transmission rates, for example, and how the current lockdown measures are helping with our transmission rates and hospital rates and so on. And then on the 22nd of February, the Prime Minister will be making a statement setting out our roadmap out of lockdown. And until we have that roadmap, I can't sadly comment on the reports that have been in the papers today.
Well, one of the things is that already scientists are saying that they are concerned about coming out of lockdown at this point. I understand that you want to consider all the views of the scientists next week, and that's why you have this decision date on the 22nd. MPs, though, very clear that schools should go back and we should move forward. They're being quoted in all sorts of places. Do you have an instinctive view? Have you seen these reports about delaying to the end of the year? And if it came down to it, would your personal instinct be to go with the science or with the MP pressure?
Well, I know, like all parents across the country, my eyes are very much fixed on that date of the 8th of March, because that is the date, the earliest date that we have said that if the data allows, and that's the critical thing, if the data allows, then we can start to unlock schools. And we all know the incredible impact that lockdown has had on children, but also actually on working parents and carers. It's been a huge effort, and I thank everybody for playing their part in doing this, because I do understand how difficult it has been. But we do have to be led by the evidence, and the Prime Minister has a huge balancing act to deploy next week. You know, he's going to look at the data in relation to the clinical evidence, but also, of course, he will be looking at all the factors, including the effects on our children and the effects on the economy. It's a very delicate balancing act, and one which must be led by the evidence. We've got to stick with it. We've done so much over the last year, you know, as a nation to deal with this. We've just got to grit our teeth and keep going, I think, for a little bit longer.
What's your criteria, though, then? What's the balancing act? What does the, infection rate have to be compared with the impact? Do you know what I mean? Because we know the problems, and you've outlined them beautifully. We all know them. But how do you make that decision? Is there a cut-off point when you think no? Because as we know, the transmission rate is as high as it's ever been, hasn't it? So we were in lockdown before. We decided to come into lockdown because of that. So what's the criteria? What's your formula?
Well, the R rate is going in the right direction. I won't put it more strongly than that, because we're being very careful to be careful and methodical about this. But in terms of the criteria, I'm afraid that's well above my pay grade. The Prime Minister and senior ministers will be deciding upon those next week, of course, bearing in mind the evidence from our scientific advisors and from SAGE and other committees. So they will be assessing those criteria, but we are very aware of the impact on mums and dads and on children, and it's why we have kept schools open for the most vulnerable children,
Yeah.
as well as, of course, the children of key workers throughout the lockdown. And also, we're very much, trying to support people who may be struggling. There's all sorts of support that's available. If you look at the gov.uk website, there's all sorts of support available for people who perhaps need help or need to talk things through with someone.
One of the things that people like to do, Victoria Atkins, to try and alleviate some of the boredom, the frustration, the need to get outside is to go for a walk, is to go and spend some time with their families. And undoubtedly, the police have a difficult job because they are trying to make sure that people aren't breaking COVID restrictions and regulations. But we have seen a number of cases where it does certainly feel like they have got very heavy-handed. I'm sure you've seen the case just this week of Tim Greeny and his sons, Bo and Ren, who were cautioned by the police for building a snowman in central London, told that they were breaking restrictions. Is building a snowman with your dad and your sons, is that against COVID restrictions?
No. And look, I think, first of all, I'd like to thank the police because although, and I understand why you've raised this particular case, actually we have all our officers across the country are doing their absolute best to manage this very difficult pandemic, and they're a critical
Undoubtedly,
part.
and no one is suggesting, no one's suggesting that they aren't, but there are moments and there are cases, not just them. Katie Tier, who went for a walk with her 5-year-old daughter, 5 miles from where she lives in Sefton, again, just to get some air, just to go out and get a bit of exercise. She ended up with a caution from the police. Jessica and Eliza Moore, they went for a walk at the Formont Reservoir a long time ago in Derby. They ended getting a caution. We interviewed Carol and David Richards, who were both fined £60 for driving 20 minutes to go and see Carol's mum, who was in a home, who suffers from dementia. The fine was rescinded. They ended up getting an apology. But there is this feeling that at times the police, and they have a difficult job to do, but they are being very heavy-handed and interpreting the rules in a way that just makes it much harder for parents and people who are at home to interpret those rules as well. How do we know that what we're going to go and do to try and get through what has become a sort of COVID exhaustion with this lockdown in a way that's not going to get us into trouble?
Yeah, look, and just to put that in context, because I know those cases and I know how upsetting actually some of them must have been for the people involved. But there are many, many hundreds of thousands, indeed millions of interactions between the police and the public over the last year, and the overwhelming majority have gone peacefully and correctly. And in fairness to the police, where mistakes have been made, the police have been quick to apologise and, as you say, rescind and so on. So I think Martin Hewitt, who is the chair of the National Police Chiefs Council, he has said, look, on occasion mistakes will be made, but what we do with that is to accept that, apologise, and to try and correct the mistakes. So the message to people is coming out from this is, please, of course you're allowed to exercise within the rules. It's got to be within your own household or your childcare bubbles and so on. But within the rules, of course, you're allowed to take that walk or build a snowman in your garden or whatever. But we've just got to keep going with these rules because we are, albeit we've had great news on the vaccinations, we're very much on course to meet our target on Monday of vaccinating the most vulnerable groups in society. Nonetheless, we still have 26,000 people in hospital with COVID. So we're in a very perilous state at the moment in the pandemic, and we've just got to grit our teeth and keep going with it.